Hello, my friends. If you design learning experiences, then it's great if they're instructionally sound, but it's even better if they are motivating. Because when you can design motivating learning experiences, your audience will devote way more time and effort to not just learning what it is that you need them to learn, but also to applying their new knowledge and skills on the job. So in this video, we'll take a look at John Keller's ARCS model of motivation, which is all about how to design motivating learning. All right, so when you're designing learning experiences, how much attention do you give to motivation specifically? If you're like a lot of instructional designers, then the answer is probably not a lot, because we often expect people to kind of just get motivated as a byproduct of our wonderful learning experiences. But this is a misconception. A lot of the great instructional designers that I see focus a lot on motivation. So this is a huge opportunity for improvement if you're designing any type of learning experiences. And the good news is that the ARCS model that we're going to explore makes motivational design very accessible. This is one of my favorite instructional design models. So you'll be able to start applying some of these principles like immediately on your next learning project. So let's dive into it. Here we have it, the ARCS model of motivation. We want to design more motivating learning experiences. And we do that by focusing on these four key elements: attention, relevance, confidence, and satisfaction. And we'll explore each of these in more detail and look at some strategies we can use to foster each one of these elements. So first up, we have attention. We want to get people's attention in the beginning of the learning experience, and then we want to keep people's attention so that we're not losing them along the way. And of course, there are many strategies we can use to do that. The first one is by presenting real-world examples. So especially if they're surprising, but not if they're too distracting. So for example, if I dove into this video and I was kind of like shaving off my beard while we were going, it would probably be surprising. You wouldn't really expect that when you're diving into a video like this, but it would probably be a little bit distracting. Probably would not be very good from a learning perspective. So keep that in mind when you are incorporating examples and incorporating any other elements too. A really good way to use examples is when the real world examples kind of contradict people's previous beliefs. So you kind of tie into their existing beliefs, but then put a spin on them just to, it's something unexpected or surprising. That's a really good way to draw people in. You can also use humor, but sparingly. This one, of course, is a little bit tricky. We don't want to try to turn your learning experience into a stand-up special. Probably not going to go over too well. And humor can be nuanced, but I'm sure you can find some opportunities to incorporate it that are kind of low risk, but also would bring a lot of joy to people who experience it. And I'm going to show you an example that I saw recently in an e-learning project that I think used humor quite well. So this is from Hanseng 2's flagship project. So it's a scenario-based, story-driven e-learning project. You can check this out. I'll share a link in the comments, but in this project, we are at an animal hospital. And this is at the beginning of the experience. We see a person with a Shiba Inu knocking on the door, so we can either open the door or ignore them. I'm sure something funny happens if we ignore them, but let's just choose to open the door. All right, this person has an appointment for Cameron at 8 a.m. and they're here for the free shots. So we can choose either one of these. We can say, "Hi, Cameron, you're such a good boy," or we can say, "I love the name Cameron for a dog." So let's say I love the name Cameron for a dog. Oh, the dog's name is Bobo. I'm Cameron. He has an appointment for those free shots. So it's kind of funny because you see the choices set us up for, either way we were referring to the person as Cameron, but obviously that was a little bit of humor that was incorporated here. The dog's name was Bobo. The person's name was Cameron. So a little funny. There are little things you can do like that. Those little moments of delight that can make your experience more engaging. Also, of course, this is no surprise to any learning designers here. Hands-on practice and participation can keep people's attention. So, of course, if you see opportunities to get people engaged and get them doing something, that's going to help with the attention piece. No surprise there. And then also, not super surprising, asking thought-provoking questions. This is another really good way to get people's attention or keep people's attention. Hopefully not cheesy ones. I'll give a go at it, but I have a question for you all. So imagine you're standing at the front of a classroom or conference room, and you have 30 people out in the audience all chatting to each other, and you need to get their attention because you're about to start your session or your lecture or your learning experience. What are you going to do? All the teachers out there, if you've taught for any amount of time at all, I'm sure plenty of examples are coming to mind. You know, turning on and off the lights, clapping. I'm sure teachers with experience have a whole toolkit of things that they can do to get attention in these situations. But the follow-up question is how you actually keep people's attention for the duration of that session or that experience. Because that's what we're really talking about here. We're not just talking about how to get the attention, we're talking about how to keep it throughout. Because if we lose it, we're no better off than where we started. And a good way that we can keep people's attention throughout is by incorporating a variety of media and methods. So for example, self-paced e-learning and animated videos and job aids and peer learning and virtual instructor-led, all of the above. So incorporating that variety will help people engage and will help keep people's attention. If you've heard of hybrid learning, that's part of what makes this effective. And the variety and the variance isn't just helpful for the media and the methods, but if you see other ways to incorporate that and have that non-distracting variety, then that's a good way to keep people's attention. For example, how I keep kind of hopping back here to the main view and then hopping back into the slides, that's to provide a little bit of variance and hopefully help keep you all engaged. So that kind of sums it up for attention. A lot of this probably isn't new to you. If you're familiar with Gagne's 9 events, which is another common instructional design model, then the very first event is gain attention. So that's what we're doing here. We're gaining and keeping attention. And if you're new to Gagne's 9 events, check out the video, but I imagine you've probably heard of that before hearing about ARCS. So some of this should be familiar to you. Okay, so next up we have relevance. So I'm sure you've heard about how important this is as well. We want to make sure that our audience knows what's in it for them. Okay, so we want to explain how the learning experience will help not just today, but also in the future. So we'll let people know by the end of this learning experience, you should be able to do X, Y, and Z immediately, as well as achieve this other stuff in the future. For example, apply all of this, you'll be a great instructional designer in the future. This is something that great IDs do. So not just today, but also help people get that long-term picture of how this is relevant. And a really good way to reinforce this relevance is to link new information or concepts to what the audience already has experienced or what the audience already knows. So again, tying back into Gagne's 9 events, this is that third event, stimulate recall. We want to ask questions or cite information that our audience is already familiar with so that we can relate the new information to that and make it easier for people to remember, easier for people to encode into long-term memory if you're familiar with cognitive information processing and cognitivism. So that's some learning science stuff. I'll create content about all of that if you'd like to see it. But that's relevance, and this is a very important part. If we don't think that something is relevant to us, we're not going to care about it, and we're definitely not going to learn from it. All right, so let's move right along to confidence. We're getting into the juicy stuff now. The first two, again, you're probably familiar with those pieces, but confidence and satisfaction are some of the best parts of this model. And if the name doesn't make it evidence, we want to build people's confidence in what they're learning. We want to build people's confidence in their new skills. So one way to do this is to set very clear expectations for what success looks like. Because if we don't do this, then people aren't going to know whether or not they're doing well. It's going to be very hard for them to feel confident because, maybe I'm doing this right, maybe I'm not. I don't know. I'm not confident about it. So we want to be very clear about what success looks like. We also want to provide opportunities for people to practice. This is one of my favorite parts. If you're an instructional designer or learning designer, you probably spend a lot of time designing practice opportunities for people to practice what they learn. Because as I'm using this new knowledge and using these new skills, I'm going to naturally become more confident in it, especially if I'm getting feedback so that I can adjust. So we want to make sure that we're giving people feedback when they're practicing so that they know how they're doing. I mean, I guess I could be practicing all day long, but if I have no idea if I'm doing it right or wrong, I'm probably not going to feel very confident. So that feedback is important. And this is another really good one. We want to give people freedom to make their own choices. So The most common place we see this in e-learning is when we have those like lockstep navigation where every time where someone has to sit through a slide and like sit through all 45 seconds of narration before they can click that next button. They can't fast forward. They can't do anything. That's a bad idea. That's not a lot of control. And the reason we want to give people control is so that they're not blaming something else for their lack of success or lack of progress. So again, minimizes the likelihood that they'll blame something external. So if I'm like, well, yeah, of course I didn't learn anything from that. I'm not going to spend 45 seconds on every single slide. I read what I needed to read. I wanted to move on. I'm not going to spend all of my time on that. So we don't want people to have that thought. We don't want them to say, oh, well, I couldn't do this because of something completely out of my control. So the more opportunities we can give people to control their own experience, the better that will do. So we could do a whole video about that, but yeah, we want to let people make their own choices in regards to their learning. And the other big point here is to scaffold the challenges. So we want to move from easier or simpler challenges to more difficult or more complex challenges. So easy example, if I'm giving you practice opportunities, I'm not going to start with something super difficult or like weave in some really difficult ones early on. We want to build your confidence, right? So we want to start more simple or easier and slowly build and build and build until, you're at the end, you're doing some super complex stuff where if you started at the beginning, you'd feel kind of overwhelmed, but because of how well it's scaffolded, it's kind of a very natural process, and the person can build their confidence along the way without feeling overwhelmed or frustrated and giving up before that point. So good strategies here for confidence building, but a lot of it does come down to that practice and feedback and freedom and learner choice. That's important too. Okay, let's move into the final one, satisfaction. My favorite part about this model, I think. So one of the best, and if the name doesn't imply, again, it's pretty self-explanatory. That's why I say ARCS is so like approachable. But for satisfaction, we want people to feel satisfied with their new skills or with their new knowledge. So not just confident that they can do it, but also satisfied. We want them to acknowledge their own growth and their own learning to build that sense of satisfaction. So we want to let people apply the new skills in a realistic setting and set them up for success. What better way to be satisfied than to show someone, yeah, this new thing you just learned, you can use this now on the job or in the real world, and you're succeeding with it. You're actually doing well. So it's actually helping you in some way. So that's what satisfaction really comes down to, giving people opportunities to apply that new skill and helping them succeed if possible. We don't want to rely too heavily on external rewards or threats. This can kind of reduce satisfaction. So if people are only doing something because they're getting some kind of reward, we want to foster people's internal locus of control. And that's, again, a kind of nerdy instructional design or learning science word. I'll do a video about that if you all would like to see it. But we want people to take their success into their own hands. We don't want to blame their lack of success on something external. We don't want them to say, oh, well, of course this didn't go as planned because of these external things to me. It's because, I could have put in more effort or I could have done something more. That's what we want to foster in people. So if we have people doing something just for external rewards, they're going to say, I'm doing this because I want that bonus or I want that sticker or I want some candy or whatever it is. It's not, I want to do this because it's important to me to do a good job. That's what we want to foster in people. I'm going to do this because it's satisfying to me when I see my own growth. And we use external rewards or threats where that's counterproductive. So if we have someone not doing something because of some potential punishment looming over their head, that's what they're going to be thinking about. It's not going to be this internal satisfaction. It's going to be some fear over a potential punishment. So we could do a whole video about that as well. Let me know if you want to see that. Another more nuanced part of this is we want to keep consequences and standards consistent. So if we're training someone to perform these skills or to make these specific decisions, and then we put them out on the job, and if sometimes they're getting rewarded for it and sometimes they're getting punished for it, they're not going to be very satisfied with those new skills they learned. Because they're going to say, hey, I'm doing this thing that I learned. I'm confident that I can do it well, but I'm getting really inconsistent results here. I'm just not going to take the risk. I'm not going to do it at all. And maybe I'm even going to feel bitter about doing it in the first place. So I guess, we want to be able to expect the consequences of our actions. So we want to prepare people for that. And we want to reinforce the new knowledge or skills often. So again, if you're familiar with the forgetting curve, it's not like, oh, we learned this once and we just forget about it forever. If there are opportunities for us as instructional designers to let people practice more, or to send follow-ups to bring the new knowledge or skills back onto people's radar, then it's going to help reinforce that satisfaction. Okay, so I've been talking at you for a while now. We are moving on to practice time. You think I would have a video that talks about practice so much without an opportunity for you to practice? You were wrong. So my assignment for you is to rewatch this video as many times as you need and take note of where I applied these different strategies. And when I say strategies, I mean all these different bullet points. So you can like screenshot each of these screens if you need to, kind of go through each of them pretty quickly. I tried to incorporate a lot of these bullet points throughout this presentation, and your assignment is to go ahead and see how many of them you can pick out. So you don't have to do this. It's completely up to you. You can rewatch the video once, or, if you really want to get every last one of these tactics, then feel free to. But if you can, leave a comment that outlines which tactics I've used and where, and you get some free internet points. If you don't have time to try to list every single one, maybe you noticed one or two, feel free to drop a comment. We can kind of crowdsource this. We can pick all of these out together. But this will be a good way to see how well honed your eye is for motivational strategies. Once you're feeling good about that, I think you know what time it is. I think it's time to apply this to a project of your own. So hopefully you have the opportunity to apply this to a learning design project. And if you're doing it, I can't really give you feedback through a YouTube video, but we do have a community space where I'm happy to hang out and where we have many, many other instructional designers hanging out. So if you want to get some feedback and kind of talk through your ID journey with us or your projects with us and see more cool e-learning like the project from Hansang I showed off earlier, join us in the community space. So I'll share a link to that below. We would love to see you in there. And if you're watching this because you'd like to become an instructional designer, I imagine we might get a varied audience here. I think ARCS kind of is bigger than instructional design, but if you're in a master's program or you're just learning about ID and you want to become an instructional designer, I have a full playlist about how to become an ID that covers many more of the theories as well as the state of the market and much more. And then finally, if you want more instructional design and learning content, you're in the right spot because there is plenty more coming every Tuesday. That's when we're uploading now. So go ahead and subscribe for plenty more content to come. And thanks for making it to the end here. I had fun with this one. I tried my best to not forget any of those strategies I wanted to use, but we'll see how many of them you pick out. And I will see you in the next video.